He wasn't even 10 years old. He still had baby teeth, still wore shorts too big for him, and still asked for biscuits when he was hungry. And yet, he had already killed 3 children. Let that sink in. This isn't a ghost story. This isn't a twisted Netflix script. This is the real-life horror story of Amarjeet Sada, a little boy from a remote village in India who, by the age of 8, had become what many now call the youngest serial killer in recorded history. And if you've ever doubted the darkness a child can carry, Amarjeet's story might just change your mind forever. Born into crushing poverty, raised in silence, and driven by something even his own parents couldn't explain, Amarjeet's story isn't just terrifying, it's tragic, layered, and deeply unsettling. And today, that's only the beginning. Trigger warning, this video discusses the murders of infants committed by a child. If that's too heavy, click away now and take care of yourself. But if you're still here, grab a cup of tea, settle into your blanket, and make sure the lights are on, because today's story is about a child who didn't wait to grow up before turning into a killer. And hey, if you believe children should never have blood on their hands, tap that like button, subscribe, and join our little true crime corner. Because around here, we believe curiosity doesn't make you creepy, it makes you careful. Now, let's begin. Before he ever picked up a brick, before he strangled his infant sister with his bare hands, Amarjeet was just a quiet boy, unliked, strange, always sitting alone. He was born in 1998 in a rural village called Mushahari in Bihar, India, one of the poorest parts of the country. Homes were made of mud and brick. Most didn't have steady electricity. Mental health care, non-existent. Here, survival wasn't a goal. It was a full-time job. People worked with their hands, lived in tightly packed mud brick homes, and raised their children the way their parents had raised them, in silence. In fact, people didn't even talk about things like anger, depression, or impulse control. If a child acted strangely, they weren't considered mentally ill. They were seen as moody, or worse, cursed. So when Amarjeet started showing signs, aggression, outbursts, cold silence, no one questioned it. His own mother, Paru Devi, thought he might be possessed. She tried to protect him the only way she knew how, smearing kajal beneath his eyes to ward off evil and tying a charm from the Hanuman temple around his wrist. But no charm could protect anyone from what Amarjeet was about to do. He was different. Other kids said so. He didn't play, he didn't laugh. And when he got angry, it came out in bursts that scared even the adults. And then, children started dying. It was sometime in early 2006, in the dry heat of Bihar's rural plains. Amarjeet was just 7 years old. He still looked like a child because he was one. His ears stuck out slightly, his arms were thin, and he still played with pebbles in the dirt outside his home. But something inside him wasn't right, and no one had any idea. That's when his aunt arrived. She came to the family home from a nearby village, her sari dusty from travel, a tiny baby girl swaddled in her arms. She was Amarjeet's mother's younger sister, and she looked exhausted, but hopeful. She had just gotten a job, a cleaning position with a wealthier family 2 towns over. It paid well by village standards. She'd be cooking, washing clothes, scrubbing floors. It was the kind of job that didn't come often to someone in her position. A single mother, no husband, no real education, but it was honest work and more money than anyone back in Musahari could make. There was just one problem. She couldn't take the baby with her. The hours were long. The commute was brutal. She'd be living in a servant's quarters with other domestic workers. Babies weren't allowed, and even if they were, she didn't have the means to feed her child while scrubbing toilets for 15 hours a day. So she begged her older sister, Amarjeet's mother, Paru, to help. "Just for a while," she said. "I'll send money every month. It's only temporary." Paru agreed, partly because it was the right thing to do, but also because she was pregnant herself. A second child was on the way, and Peru saw this as a chance to prepare. "This will be good for me," she told her husband. "I'll use it as practice before the baby comes." The baby would stay with them, surrounded by family. She'd have food, shelter, other children to keep her company. What could possibly go wrong? The first few weeks passed without incident. The baby cried often, as babies do, but Peru took care of her as best as she could. She had many mouths to feed, and her hands were always busy, but she tried to keep the child safe. She even told Amarjeet to be careful around the baby. "She's not a toy," she warned him. But Amarjeet didn't answer. He just stared at the baby, blankly, and then, one afternoon changed everything. Peru had gone out briefly to fetch water from the pump a few houses down. She wasn't gone more than 15 minutes. It was a hot, still afternoon. The baby had been crying again. The others were outside. Only Amarjeet remained in the room with her. And when Peru returned, the crying had stopped. The silence at first felt like a relief, but as she stepped inside, something didn't feel right. The baby was lying too still. Her arms were limp. Her face was an odd shade of blue. Peru rushed over, called her name, shook her gently. Nothing. The baby was dead. And Amarjeet? He was standing in the corner, staring. The truth didn't come out right away, not in words. But her tiny body told its own story. Her lips were bruised. Her cheeks were puffy and red. Her fragile arms, no more than twigs, had marks on them. There were small abrasions on her face, and her neck was swollen. Whispers spread quickly, and when a neighbor pressed Amarjeet gently, he said, without emotion, "She wouldn't stop crying, so I hit her." He had punched her over and over with his little fists. It wasn't a sudden accident. It was deliberate, slow, calculated in the way a child might twist the wings off a fly just to see what happens. And the baby? She was too small to scream for long. Peru panicked. What was she supposed to do? Tell her sister? Call the police? Ruin everything? They made a choice. When the baby's mother returned later that week, face glowing from earning her first real pay, arms full of gifts, she knew immediately that something was wrong. The house was too quiet. Her baby was nowhere in sight. Peru broke down. She told her sister the baby had fallen ill suddenly, that she had tried to save her, that she died in her sleep. But the mother knew. She knew. She dropped to the floor in hysterics, screaming, crying, clutching her chest like it might explode from the pain. Neighbors had to hold her up, and Amarjeet, still watching, still expressionless. Eventually, after hours of sobbing, Peru pulled her sister aside. She confessed the truth, not all of it, but enough. She said Amarjeet had done it, that he didn't mean to, that it was an accident, and then she begged. "For the family," she whispered, "please don't say anything." She wasn't just asking to protect her son, she was asking to protect their reputation. In Musahari, shame could ruin a family. It could cost jobs, marriages. It could brand you as untouchable. So the baby's mother, her world shattered, stayed silent. They buried the baby in the back of the compound, wrapped her in cloth, said a prayer. Peru placed a clay dia beside the grave and let it burn all night. No police report was ever filed. No doctor was ever called. They told the villagers it was pneumonia, a fever, something they couldn't afford to treat. But some of the neighbors already knew, and so did Amarjeet. He never said he was sorry. He never cried. He never asked why everyone was quiet for days after the funeral. He just went back to playing in the dirt, staring, silent, and no one realized. He had just killed for the first time. After the baby's death, his infant cousin, life in the village seemed to carry on as usual. The whispers quieted. The ground where they buried her dried over. And inside the Sada household, no one spoke of it again. But if anyone had truly watched Amarjeet during those weeks, they would have seen something shifting behind his eyes. He was still the same small boy, narrow shoulders, quick steps. He still walked barefoot in the dirt, still picked stones from the mud, still played near the brick wall that bordered the house. But he wasn't like other children. He had no siblings to distract his parents, no rivals for attention. Amarjeet was an only child, and in a place like Musahari that meant something, especially because he was a boy. In many parts of rural Bihar, being a son came with weight. Girls were expected to serve, to marry, to disappear. Boys were valued, treated as future providers, protectors of legacy. Even in poverty, boys were seen as a kind of investment. And Amarjeet, being both the only child and the only son, was treated like royalty, not worshipped, but exalted. He was rarely scolded, never hit. When he shouted, people listened. When he misbehaved, they said he was just strong-willed. Even the neighbors knew better than to correct him. He belonged to the Sadas, and the Sadas adored him. So while the adults saw him as spirited, the other kids, they saw him for what he really was, a little tyrant. He would play outside most days, but he didn't play to have fun. He played to dominate. He'd gather a few younger kids from the neighborhood and lead them toward his compound, or behind the bushes where the women didn't go. And once they were there, he changed. He ordered them to sit in a circle. Then he'd make up rules, loud, angry rules. He would scream if someone disobeyed. He'd throw pebbles. He once grabbed a stick and hit a boy for not clapping fast enough during a game. No one stopped him. Some children started avoiding him altogether. Others obeyed out of fear. But no matter what happened, Amarjeet was never punished. He learned something powerful in those months. He could scare people. He could control people. And no one was going to stop him. Even Peru, his mother, who was now visibly pregnant with her second child, had started keeping her distance, not because she suspected him of murder, but because she had grown used to his silence, his temper, his strange, emotionless stares. She thought maybe he was just acting out because he was about to lose his only child title. Maybe he was scared, jealous, confused. She didn't know. She just knew she was tired. She had another baby coming, and Amarjeet had always been quiet, even obedient at times. So she let it go. And Amarjeet? He waited, because soon his mother would give birth. And that baby would be entirely his. She was born in the thick of summer, a small, warm-skinned baby girl, barely heavier than a loaf of bread. Her cries were sharp but soft, and her head was always gently falling to one side when Peru held her. For the first time in a long time, there was joy in the Sada household. Peru was glowing. She had delivered safely. The village women came to bless the child. A few neighbors brought small gifts, cloth, a handful of milk, some cooked rice. Even Amarjeet stood nearby, quiet, watching. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. Peru told herself it was just the shock of becoming a big brother. He would adjust. And at first, it seemed like he did. He would sometimes sit near the baby while she slept, watching her chest rise and fall. He touched her hand once, just once, then pulled away as if he felt nothing. He didn't say much those days, just wandered outside, played alone, came in when he was hungry, left again when he was bored. But no one noticed the way he looked at the baby, the stillness that came over him when she moved. Like he was studying her. Weeks turned into months. Peru was exhausted. Her body ached from childbirth, and her days were filled with crying, feeding, changing cloth diapers, cooking, cleaning, fetching water. Amarjeet helped sometimes, but only when asked. He didn't volunteer, and he rarely ever touched the baby. He never held her tight, never smiled at her, never kissed her forehead the way older brothers sometimes do. And yet, nothing seemed wrong. 8 months passed, and in that time, the worst seemed behind them. The family had settled into routine. Peru was beginning to feel like life had given her a second chance. The villagers had stopped whispering. Her husband was working more regularly. The baby was growing well. There were no signs, no outbursts, no warnings. Everything felt calm, and for the first time in a long time. Peru allowed herself to believe that maybe Amarjeet had changed, that maybe he had just needed time. But monsters don't give warnings. They wait, quietly, patiently, until the moment is right. It was a windless evening. The sky was thick and gray, one of those heavy evenings before a storm that never arrives. Peru had just finished washing dishes and stepped outside to check the firewood pile. Her husband was down the road speaking with a neighbor. The baby, just 8 months old, was resting quietly on a folded mat near the wall. She wasn't crying, wasn't moving, just calm, sleeping, and Amarjeet was inside the room with her. So Peru stepped out, just for a few minutes, and when she came back, everything was quiet. The lantern was still flickering. The mat was where she left it. But something was wrong. The baby wasn't moving. At first, Peru thought maybe she finally fell asleep. Maybe she was just tired. She walked over, bent down. Then she screamed. The baby's face was pale, her head misshapen. There was blood soaked into the cloth beneath her, a slow, dark stain spreading like ink. Peru scooped her up, screaming. Her head was soft, too soft, crushed. And beside her, half tucked behind the door, a brick, a blood-stained brick. Peru's scream shattered the night. She shrieked with a kind of agony that didn't sound human. It poured out of her chest, raw, ragged, endless. Neighbors came running, feet slapped against the dirt, curtains were pushed aside, doors flung open, and then her husband burst through the door. He took one look at the baby in Peru's arms, and then he turned to Amarjeet. The boy was standing still, hands by his sides. The father slapped him, hard. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Amarjeet's head jerked to the side, his lips split slightly. And this time, he cried. Not loud, but real. Tears welled in his eyes and spilled over, his small body heaving once, then twice. The first visible emotion anyone had seen from him in months. Still, he didn't defend himself. He didn't explain, just stood there, eyes wet. And then came the words, flat, quiet. I hit her with a brick. Neighbors stepped in quickly. One woman grabbed the father's arm, holding him back. Another pulled Peru away from the doorway. Someone shouted, "Stop! Stop! He's just a child!" But it was too late. The baby was gone, and nothing could take that back. The baby was just 8 months old. She hadn't walked yet, hadn't spoken her first word. She had only ever known the inside of one home, one room, and the arms of the family that should have protected her. But it was her brother, her only sibling, who ended her life. And what's worse, he didn't run. He didn't try to hide it. He simply cried and watched as the family collapsed around him. They buried her quietly, like the first. No authorities, no autopsy, no answers. They wrapped her in cotton, placed her in a shallow grave just a few steps from the cousin who had died before her, and covered the ground with bare hands. No one said Amarjeet's name out loud, but they all knew. And when some of the neighbors whispered about going to the police, the family begged them not to. "Please," Peru said, "please don't ruin his future. He's still so young. He doesn't know what he's doing." And just like that, silence fell over the village. Another grave, another secret. And Amarjeet? He went right back to walking barefoot through the yard, picking at stones, sitting in silence, as if nothing had happened, because to him, it already had. After the second death, Something shifted in the village. No one said it out loud, but you could feel it in the air. The silence, the hesitation, the way women would quickly usher their children indoors when they saw Amarjeet walking barefoot through the dusty paths, the way men averted their eyes when passing the Sada home. The whispers had returned, but this time, so had the fear. People no longer greeted Peru in the mornings. Children no longer played outside near the Sada's compound. Women who used to offer rice or tea during visits now walked with their heads down, gripping their babies tighter. Something wasn't right in that house, and everyone knew it. They just didn't know what to do about it. Musahari was not a place of systems. There were no daycares, no creches, no public safety nets. If a mother had to work, she had two choices: keep the baby strapped to her back all day, or leave her in the care of someone else and pray she'd be safe. And for many women, the best they could do was leave their child inside the village primary school, a shaded building with open-air windows and dusty floors, a space where multiple mothers would drop off their babies while they went to the nearby fields or cleaned the homes of richer families in town. It wasn't safe, it wasn't formal, but it was better than nothing. That's what Chunchan Devi thought when she left her 6-month-old daughter Khushbu at the school one hot afternoon in 2007. She had to run errands just for a short while. The baby had just been fed. She was wrapped in a soft cloth, sleeping peacefully under the shaded corridor of the school. Chunchan told herself she'd be back in 15 minutes. She had no idea it would be the last time she saw her child alive. No one noticed Amarjeet slip away from home. No one asked him where he was going. And when he arrived at the school, no one thought to stop him. He walked in, quiet as ever, and sat near the baby, just watched her for a moment. And then he took her. No screaming, no witnesses. He carried her to a nearby patch of bushes just past the edge of the field. There, he strangled her. Then, just like with his sister, he picked up a brick and he smashed it down on her small head again and again until her body stopped twitching. Then, with his bare hands, he dug into the earth, just enough to cover her, just enough to hide what he had done. When Chunchan returned to the school and found the baby gone, she screamed so loud the whole village heard her. People rushed in, men scattered in different directions, women cried and searched nearby huts, but there was no sign of Khushbu. That's when someone said it. "I saw Amarjeet near the school." The police were called, for the first time. When the officers arrived, they were skeptical. After all, Amarjeet was just 8, a child. How could a child be behind a disappearance? They pulled him aside and asked him, gently, what he knew. And Amarjeet smiled. He said, "Yes, I killed her." Then, without hesitation, he led them to the grave. Beneath the packed soil, Khushbu's tiny body was found, strangled, bloodied, buried with a stone. The officers were stunned, not just because of the crime, but because of how Amarjeet told them everything, calmly, cheerfully, like it meant nothing. He asked for a biscuit, then described the killing like he was recounting a chore. "She was sleeping," he said. "I took her away, killed her with a brick, and buried her." That was it. No remorse, no shame, just facts. Forensic psychologists were brought in. They said he was a sadist, a child who derived pleasure from causing pain, that this wasn't some fluke of immaturity, that this boy was fully aware of what he was doing. He didn't act in confusion, he acted with intent, and suddenly the whole village knew. This was not a troubled boy, this was a killer. But the law was not ready for a killer like Amarjeet. In 2007, Indian law stated that anyone under the age of 18 could not be tried as an adult. That meant no criminal trial, no prison sentence, no life behind bars, and absolutely no death penalty. Instead, Amarjeet was sent to a juvenile detention home. There, he would receive counseling, therapy, and schooling for 10 years. That was the maximum sentence available under the law. No one knows what truly happened inside those walls. No photos, no interviews, no updates. In 2016, Amarjeet Sada turned 18. His file was sealed, his record erased, his identity changed, and then he disappeared. Some say he was relocated by the government. Others believe he now lives somewhere in India under a new name, quietly working, quietly blending in. But the facts remain. 3 babies died, and the one who killed them walks free. So now I ask you, what do you think? Can someone who murdered at 8 years old ever truly change? Was this a case of nature? Was he born broken? Or did the system fail him and everyone around him by ignoring the signs? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you believe no child should ever have blood on their hands, like this video, subscribe, and join me again for more true crime stories that dive deep into the darkest parts of the human mind. Until next time, stay safe out there, and be careful who you leave your children with, even if it's just for a few minutes.